On April 28, 2022, Christian Kazadi posted this photo from Botswana to Instagram, calling it a bucket list experience. The 29-year-old entrepreneur and founder was in the country attending the first ever Forbes Under 30 Africa Summit. But in a mysterious and baffling sequence of events, Kazadi was found dead in police custody, over 1,000 miles away in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. 1 year later, Kazadi's family are still looking for an official explanation to why a dream business trip ended in a nightmare.
Christian Kazadi was a 29-year-old entrepreneur and founder of a social media and digital marketing agency based in Johannesburg, South Africa, called Click Media Productions. He founded it a few years ago. One of his dreams was to appear on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. For 2022, he had applied to the Forbes Africa 30 Under 30 list. And as part of that application, even though he didn't make it onto the final list, he was invited to go to the first ever Forbes 30 Under 30 Africa Summit in Botswana, which took place at the end of April of last year.
Something that was basically well known in the States, like social media management, managing client social media and all that. It's not something that's very, very well known in Africa. It's something that's probably well known in the States because you guys originated it and you guys basically create all of these apps, and it's a market that's very viable in the States. But in Africa, it's not that viable. Not all corporate companies have like socials or anything like that. They don't have Google presence, they don't have SEOs. So that was a field that Chris saw a gap in, and he was like, oh, let's build a company and let me chase that, because it was something that he was well knowledge in, and he loved social media and he understood social media.
And one of the first big breaks was in 2017 when he helped do social media content for the NBA Africa game, which basically brought some of the NBA's biggest stars at the time to Johannesburg. Dirk Nowitzki was there, Serge Ibaka, Luol Deng. There's also a photo of Chris with Chris Paul as well.
The Forbes Under 30 Africa Summit ended the same day Christian posted his last photo to Instagram. He stayed in Botswana for another 2 days before returning to South Africa. On April 30th, Christian arrived in Johannesburg at 10:45 a.m. on an Air Botswana flight, but was denied entry by immigration. He was born in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but in 2001 he immigrated to South Africa with his mother and brothers to join his father, and they sought asylum as refugees. Christian had never returned to Congo since then.
Do you remember when you heard from him that he was having trouble entering, and if he had any idea why it happened? I know that in past times he had left South Africa and come back without any issue. But do you remember sort of what he told you about that and what was going on then?
I had scanned copies of his passport and his work visa. Sunday morning, the first message he sent me is like, hey bro, send me those copies. So I was like, okay, no problem. I sent him the copies, and then I waited a while, and then I messaged him again. I was like, yo, what's up? What time are you landing? When should we come get you? But that time I hadn't known he had landed already, but they were not giving him a problem. They're saying his work permit is invalid. His work permit's invalid, and that's the issue he was having. So that's why he asked me to send him those documents.
We saw his work visa, a photocopy of it, and the work visa was valid. It ran from 2020 until 2023, so it was valid at that time. According to the latest human rights report on South Africa published by the US State Department, unfortunately, it's not uncommon for immigrants in South Africa, asylum seekers, to face difficulties at the border, re-entering, and it seems like that's what occurred to Christian that day.
He told me that they were holding him in a holding cell, because I think it's procedure in terms of if a person comes and the documents are not right. He advised that the best thing to do in that situation would be to basically go back to Congo and go to the department and have them sorted out immediately, and he'd be back like within a day.
On May 1st, Christian decided to go to the Congo to sort out the work permit issue. He missed his initial flight to Lubumbashi and was booked on a later flight to Kinshasa with a layover in Ethiopia. The plan was to then fly from Kinshasa to Lubumbashi and deal with the work permit there, as Lubumbashi is closer to Johannesburg, and one of Christian's brothers happened to be there sorting out passport issues to travel to the US. Christian arrived in Kinshasa just after midnight on May 2nd and sent a text message to Patrick at 1 a.m. Patrick says he saw the message when he woke up at 4 a.m. and responded.
Around 9 a.m. that Monday now, That's when a friend of ours who was supposed to receive him at the airport calls me on video call, and he's with Chris. So then that's when Chris tells me, he's like, oh no, I've landed and everything's all right. So like an hour later, the friend he was with calls me again on video call, and he's like, yo, Pat, do me a favor, check up on Chris. So I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, he was with Chris just now, and Chris looks a bit shaken up, and he had bruises on his hands. And then I'm like, nah, I don't understand. What do you mean? He's like, last night he didn't pick up Chris because he was supposed to actually fetch Chris at the airport. He's like, Chris didn't call him when he arrived. Chris only called him this morning. So that's when I asked him, I was like, yo, do you know where he slept and stuff like that? He also didn't know where Chris spent the night, but Chris only called him this morning. And when he arrived, Chris already had 2 other people waiting for him in a separate car. Chris told him that no, he's going with these people because apparently they knew the way or something like that.
At this point, the plan was for Christian to come back to the airport later in the afternoon to catch his next flight and land in Lubumbashi around 6 p.m. But later that evening, Patrick began to worry, as he found out from a family friend that was supposed to pick up Christian at the airport in Lubumbashi that Christian was not on the flight.
This family friend messages Patrick, Christian's brother, this video that had begun circulating, showing Christian acting erratically, very bizarrely at a funeral, where he appears to be getting inside a casket and shouting, and then he's sort of pulled away and arrested. And this was completely out of the ordinary for someone like Christian. And it was extremely unclear to the family at that time why Christian hadn't been picked up by that family friend, what had happened in the ensuing hours.
So when I saw that, I was mad confused. I was like, no, man, what's going on here? Because at first I thought, no, that can't be him. But then I looked at his clothing. I was like, that's definitely his clothes, and that is him. So then I was confused. I was like, okay, this is very, very, very weird and bizarre. So when I see that, the first thing that comes to mind, I'm like, this person's not in his right state of mind. Like, Chris is basically, his eyes even are not like focused or anything. Like, you can see he's not aware of the surroundings, like, or any way that he is. And the things he's doing are uncoordinating. This is not Chris in any sense of the word.
They eventually learned he had been held in a military detention center on the outskirts of Kinshasa. That night, someone with his family friend who was supposed to pick up Christian went to the detention center, speak with the guards there. It was late at night, past 10 p.m. The guards told him that Christian Kazadi had been arrested there and was being held there, but they weren't able to see him because the visiting hours were over. Also, he wasn't a member of the family, so he wouldn't have been able to see him anyway.
So at that same time also, I do not share the news with moms because that's definitely going to freak her the hell out. So I keep it to myself and nobody in the family actually knows. So that whole night, I just sit back and I pray and I pray that night.
On the morning of May 3rd, the friend in Lubumbashi told Patrick that he knows a general who works at the camp where Christian is being held. The friend received an update from his contact and phoned Patrick.
So he's like, oh, Pat, I'm so sorry and whatnot. I'm sorry to let you know this. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, nah, Chris has been found, but he's dead. And now I'm shocked. I'm like, what do you mean Chris is dead? And he's like, nah, Chris is dead. His body has been found and it's outside the police station and he was murdered. What is body doing outside the police station if this guy was in the police cell? So now I'm just trying to get a hold of everybody in Dingy. And while I'm trying to get a hold of them, that's when this guy sends me the video of Chris's lifeless body laying there and they recorded him. That was just like confirmation to basically, and then from the video you can see that this person has been beaten.
The questions that are still unanswered today are, why wasn't Christian able to re-enter South Africa? What happened to him on that day that he was in Congo? Why was he at that funeral? Why was he arrested? What happened to him at the detention center? And then how did he die? And those are the questions that, unfortunately, despite the investigation ongoing in Congo and the public records request filed by his family in South Africa and the dozens of calls and efforts to reach out to people, both the police in Congo and the ministry in South Africa, those are the questions that we still haven't been able to answer, now more than a year after his tragic death. In the days after Christian's death, I called at least a dozen officials at the Home Affairs Ministry and the airport over multiple days. And eventually what we were recommended to do was to file a public records request in South Africa. In July of 2022, Christian's family, his mother and brother, filed this public records request. And under South African law, government agencies must respond within 30 days, and they can apply for one extension only of another 30 days. And it's now been several months since July of last year. The ministry has told me and his family repeatedly that they will have a response, but they have never responded to the request and haven't provided any information on why Christian was an admitted entry. Last year, Christian's family hired a lawyer in Congo to follow the case. He initially was able to sort of track down the police officers that were in charge of the case. However, they told him that they couldn't find the actual case file. The case file that showed which officers were being investigated for what happened to Christian.
He definitely did not have any business enemies, because what he was pushing was his own lane. It's not like he's doing mining and he'd be competition with the other mine that has been around. No. Social media is something that nobody hardly does here. And the people that are doing it actually like competition, because what you do is you let the next people know that this is important.
Click Media is now run by Patrick, Chris's brother, who runs the company as CEO. He was one of the co-founders back in 2016. And his role, while Chris was still here and was still leading the company, was more of a backroom role, managing the operations and the business side, while Chris was really the public face, the one getting the clients and maintaining the relationships. Since Chris's passing, he's had to face the difficulties of retaining clients and growing the company in the face of the conspiracy theories that were spread about Chris and his death.
It's a smear campaign where everybody's like, yeah, he's a witch, and he deserved what came to him, and he deserved what came to him. So that whole thing also messed up his reputation, because even his close friends, everybody, business entourage, everybody, because at first people are shocked. Christian died. The Christian we know, Christian died. People are sympathetic, and then that story comes out, and then everybody just backs away. So all of his friends, business partners, everybody starts backing away and disassociating themselves with him. So that whole thing was also a dilemma for my mom, because now she's trying to mourn her child, but she's being attacked in terms of, yeah, you sacrificed your child, you were teaching your child witchcraft and stuff like that.
I spoke to several musicians that Chris represented at Click Media, who were able to get their music out there a lot more and become a lot better known and have a lot more success in the years after they worked with Chris at Click Media. And he touched so many lives through not just his work with Click Media, but also, as his brother Patrick has told me many times, the fact that he was always willing to help, even at the cost of taking time out of his own day and his own work.
For me, the thing that hurts me the most is Chris never came back from Forbes for me. He never came back. Like, we had planned that whole trip of, oh, you made it. Go there, show these people, and come back and let's replan and let's restructure. He never came back. He respected you guys, and he went to you guys basically to showcase and let you guys know that, hey, I'm out here, and you guys will hear a lot more from me as time goes on. And everybody else has failed him, because everybody has failed him.